That's Leah Tulin, and we'll hear that Leah is is a senior advisor with the Attorney General's office and will be staffing the task force. So we are, as you heard, we're subject to the Open Meetings Act, so we need to make sure that what we do has, people have access to that. So those were those initial remarks. We just wanted to make sure all the task force was aware of that and how we need to conduct our proceedings going forward. So welcome everybody. My name is Vicki Schultz. I'm very privileged to be working with all of you to chair this task force. We have a brisk job ahead of us, a lot to do. We're going to march through this meeting. As you know, we formally launch October 1st, but according to the legislation. However, we thought it useful to meet today to just really talk about how we're going to do our work. This is a planning meeting. This is a meeting to just kind of set the stage so that we can begin in October and get down to business and really begin our work together. So thank you for joining us this morning. I just wanted to mention to all of you, we have a really interesting charge. This is an important work that we're doing. As you know, HB 18 establishes, among other things, that certain individuals shall have access to legal representation in eviction proceedings. And we will establish an access to counsel and evictions program that Maryland Legal Services Corporation will administer. So I just wanted to give that framework, and that is really part of our charge. As you know, the legislature talked about why this is important. And I wanted to I know you all have access to HB 18, and I'm sure you've all read the legislation, but I did want to mention something important that really jumped out at me, and that's the why. Why did the legislature take this action, create this body, and also pass the legislation? And if you look at the purpose clause, which I think is important because it gives us kind of a window into the intent of the legislature, you'll see that as they talk about why this action, why they passed this bill, they talked about evictions have a disparate impact on Black and brown households in the state, and the General Assembly seeks to end the disparate impact of evictions based on race and gender. And providing a right and access to counsel to tenants in eviction cases is a proven means of preventing the disruptive displacement of families and the resulting social, economic, and public health costs of such displacement. And I mention that because I think it's helpful to reference the frame, the why we're doing this work, this important work that we have ahead of us. We have a certain specific obligation under the legislation, and I wanted to also just mention that just as we begin our work together. And as you know, the task force is specifically created. The Attorney General was charged with creating this task force, and each of you holds certain seats according to the legislature's idea about balancing the task force and making sure all stakeholders were represented in some way on this task force. But our specific obligations are really to evaluate the provision of services under this act, including the performance of designated organizations and community groups, to study potential funding sources, and importantly, to make recommendations to improve the implementation of this act, including necessary policy and statutory changes. So that's really at the heart of the work that we have before us. We are required, as you I'm sure well know, to report our findings and recommendations to the governor and to the General Assembly by January 1st of 2022. So that's our aim, that's our purpose, and also our obligations as a task force. So I just thought it would be important to reference that. Again, I know all of you have probably read that legislation, but I think it's important just for our focus. That's what lies ahead of us. So as I said, but before we can begin, we're going to be spending some time together over the next few months doing this work. So I think it's important, and really frankly, this task force is slated to go on for some years. So a daunting proposition, but here we are. Let's focus on what's immediately in front of us, but I think it's important for us to get to know one another. So we're going to take a few minutes really to do some introductions. I think that's important. We'll get to know each other better as we do our work, but I think at least we should know who's in the room and or the Zoom and who we're working with. So I'm going to begin, but I'd like us each to, certainly say your name, tell us where you work now, what you're doing now, how you come to the task force, specifically what seat you hold, because as you know, we all hold designated seats under this task force structure. And then a little bit about yourself, what brings you to this issue, how you've been involved, just briefly. We're not going to belabor, but I do think it's important to have a little context. So I'm going to begin. As you know, I'm Vicki Schultz. I work now at the University of Baltimore School of Law. I'm Associate Dean here. And I have been involved. I'm a member of the Maryland Access to Justice Commission. And I've done work in fair housing and fair lending at the Department of Justice. I've worked on housing issues. I worked on the foreclosure crisis some years ago in Maryland. I've worked with the Legal Aid Bureau at the beginning of my career, and I did housing work there. So this is something I care deeply about and has kind of intertwined throughout my career. So I'm very excited to work with all of you. And let's go next then to, I'm just going to go around the room and call on you because it's hard on a screen. If we had a table, we'd go around. Let's see, I see Pam Ortiz.
Good morning, I'm Pam Ortiz. I am the Director for Access to Justice with the Maryland Administrative Office of the Courts, and I'm a judiciary appointee to this task force. I'm also a member of the Maryland Access to Justice Commission and was the prior executive director when the commission was part of the Maryland Judiciary. I also staffed the 2013-14 legislative task force on a right to counsel. So I've been working on some of these topics for a long time with many of you.
Thank you. And Kelly O'Connor?
Hello. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kelly O'Connor. I am with Government Relations and Public Affairs with the Judiciary, so obviously a judiciary appointee. And over the years, I've primarily been Pam Ortiz's bag man. We've worked on these issues a long time. They were a priority for Chief Judge Bell and Chief Judge Barbera, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and Pam Newland.
Good morning, everyone. I am an employee of Henderson Webb. We have over 10,000 apartments in the greater Baltimore metropolitan area. So I'm on the landlord designated seat. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. We were a founding member of Maryland Multi-Housing Association, which represents thousands and thousands of apartments in the area. I'm very passionate about the industry and about tenant issues, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you. Luke, and how do I say your last name?
Lanciano.
Lanciano, thank you.
So yeah, I'm Luke Lanciano. I work for Bernstein Management Corporation in our compliance department. I'm also the vice chair for Maryland Government Affairs at AOBA, one of the other trade organizations in the state. Our company owns and manages about 4,500 apartments in the region, including in Maryland. And in my role in this industry, I've been here about 10 years. Served in a variety of roles, from property management to property accounting. I've personally overseen some evictions, and from the accounting side, I've seen the impacts that it has on housing providers, as well as the impact it, of course, has on tenants. So I'm definitely interested and looking forward to our discussions in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you. And Deb Seltzer?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deb Seltzer. I'm the Executive Director of Maryland Legal Services Corporation. We will be the administrator of the Access to Counsel program. We are the state's largest single funder of civil legal aid as a legislatively created nonprofit. We have been funding general civil legal services for more than 30 years and have also had a focus on eviction prevention, specifically over the last few years with targeted grants, but it's something that we have funded with our general grants for a long time.
Great, thank you. And Stu Sims? I think you need to unmute, Stu. We can't hear you. Stu, we're going to come back to you in a minute, okay? All righty. How about Charisse Lou? Oh, we're running into technical difficulties already. There you go. Charisse, are you there?
I'm not sure Charisse is on.
Okay. All right. Stu, are you ready? You look like
can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Very good. Good morning. Stu Sims, Chief Counsel at Maryland Legal Aid. I've been here exactly 1 year after more than 2 decades in public service as State's Attorney and Secretary of Public Safety. And most recently, 15 years in private practice. We are currently facing a significant part of this crisis in representing individuals around the state in all the counties, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks so much. Natalie McSherry?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Natalie McSherry. I'm an attorney in private practice with Cramon and Graham in Baltimore City. Currently the president of the Maryland State Bar Association. Also serve on the Access to Justice Commission, and previously had the pleasure of chairing the board of Maryland Legal Services Corporation, and before that, Maryland Volunteer Lawyers. So lots of years in the arena of civil legal services, and I really do look forward to working on this.
Thanks, Natalie. Rena Shaw?
Hi, everyone. This is Rena Shaw. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Access to Justice Commission. I was head of a vice chair of the COVID-19 Access to Justice Task Force, which the final report created about 60 recommendations, many of which went to the legislature, one of which was the right to counsel. I've been with the Maryland Access to Justice Commission since November 2015, but prior to that, I was at Maryland Legal Aid. I started in the Housing and Consumer Law Unit, and then moved up to becoming their first head of their Human Rights Initiative. I'm really honored and happy to be part of this group. I think we all know how big evictions and the crisis is going to be, and how much attorneys can help stave off that crisis. So I look forward to working with you all on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Rena. Okay, and Jessica Kaufman?
Good morning. I am Jessica Kaufman. I am an Assistant Attorney General and Director of the Housing Unit of the Consumer Protection Division. I serve on this task force as a member of tenant advocacy groups, and I look forward to working with all of you on this very important issue.
Terrific. And now let's hear from Latanya Abram.
don't think Ms. Abram is here.
Okay. All right. How about Jason Butler?
Hey, good morning, everyone. I am Jason Butler. I am currently a student in the philosophy, law, and ethics program at University of Baltimore. I am here representing the interest of tenants and renters. So I look forward to working with you all going forward.
Great. Okay. And then Catherine Paul.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Kat. I am our Government Relations and Public Policy Manager at CASA. CASA is the largest immigrant rights and advocacy organization in Maryland and in the Mid-Atlantic region. We represent around 115,000 Black and Brown immigrants and working families. So my goal here will be to represent their interests. We do have a legal department at CASA that has been representing folks in eviction hearings. And I just wanted to share that we started a COVID hotline last year in the very beginning of the pandemic. And the number one reason why individuals were calling CASA's office was because of inability to pay rent and fear of eviction, which, if you can imagine, for the largest immigrant rights organization is not always the number one reason why people are calling. So I'm very excited to be here and to lift up the voices of Black and Brown immigrants in Maryland.
Thank you. Okay, and we wanted to hear from Carla Rodriguez.
Señora Rodriguez. Señora Rodriguez. I know she's in here. I'm just not sure if she can hear me. Señora Rodriguez. Señora Rodriguez, ¿me escucha?
All right. We can come back. Ms. Rodriguez speaks Spanish, and so we'll have an interpreter with us so that she can participate fully in the work of the task force. She may not be here now. If that's possible to introduce herself later, we would welcome that. So that's great. And then I'm just going to check again for Charisse Lou to see if she's joined us in the interim. I don't think so. Okay. All right. And then Leah, if you could introduce yourself as well, because you'll be working among us and helping us through this endeavor.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Leah Tulin. I am a special assistant to the Attorney General, and I wear many hats in the office, one of which is going to be staffing this task force. So I look forward to working with everyone, and I right now will be behind the scenes running the tech.
And actually, we're going to turn to you now, Leah. So just to, because some of the logistics, this is really how we're going to operate, to talk about where we're going to have documents, some of that sort of stuff, so that you can access information. We want to make sure that there's easy access for everybody. There's a lot of background information for all of you to read up on and get up to speed. Some of you may have already read a lot of these things, but we want to make sure you have full access to all the materials that we need to do our work. Leah?
Thank you. So you should have received, task force members, a link to a Google Drive that has the agenda and some background materials. If you were able to access that, then that's great. It came in an email from Vicki, and we'll use Google Drive as the place where we store and share documents. You don't have to have a Gmail address. You do need to have a Google account, which you can use whatever your work email address is to set up. If you need help, I'm happy to help. And that's the main logistical item. I mentioned, I think before we started recording, that We'll post agendas and meeting notices on our website. We'll post the recordings as the minutes of our meetings on our website. And you can reach me at my email address, or you can reach me at the A2C at oag.state.md.us. And I also see all of those messages. So I think that's the main logistical item. And then we'll primarily use Teams for meetings. At some point, maybe we'll gather in person once things permit us to do so. Did I miss anything, Vicki?
No, I think that's right. Yeah, we're going to talk about, the work ahead and how we accomplish it. I think we'll be virtual for a good bit of our work, but there may be opportunities. In fact, I'm hoping for some in-person opportunities, especially as we go out on some listening sessions. So we're going to talk about that next. But I know everybody, this just makes it easier for folks to convene, especially at 8:30 in the morning, rather than driving to Baltimore, from wherever you are. So we'll try and make that as easy as possible. And yes, we may try and get together, especially when we get down to our final business and recommendations and that sort of thing. But we'll see. We'll see how things unfold. As we know, in this era, nothing's a given. We just have to roll with it. So, all right. From that then, and again, and you can always reach me. We'll make sure to circulate contact information too, or we'll put that up on the Google Drive so we have one another's emails, and you have my cell. I want to make sure, you're always welcome to call or text me. That's a good way to reach me too. If you need to ask any questions as well. So let's just talk about, now I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the work ahead. What are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? And we have a short timetable in which to do our work. But our work must begin at, really with gathering information and hearing from people. Like any task force, that's really so important and critical to the work ahead of us. So in order to do that, roughly, I just wanted to sketch out how I see the next 3 months, which will culminate in that report that we need to submit to the Governor and General Assembly on January 1st. So in order to get to the goal, we, after the Ravens game last night, anyway, we have to, I'm presuming roughly that we'll spend October really doing our listening sessions and fact-finding work. So that will be our time to really hear from some of the agencies critically involved in this work, such as the judiciary and DHCD on rental assistance. We want to know what's happening. We have to really understand where things are in terms of the eviction crisis itself and how are Marylanders faring. So we need to do a little bit of fact finding from some of the key agencies. MLSC is with us in the form of Deb, so we may also want to hear from her. We want to hear what's about other jurisdictions. We're not alone. This right to counsel, access to counsel initiative is happening around the country, and some other jurisdictions are ahead of us in terms of implementation. So we look forward to hearing from some of these other jurisdictions too, to learn lessons from them about what works, what doesn't work, what are some of the challenges that they've overcome. I think that'll help fortify our knowledge and some possibilities about what we need to do. We also, of course, want to hear from the people doing the work, the legal services providers, landlords, property owners, people who are really enmeshed in this, in the crisis, working in the housing field. So we'll definitely want to be doing a session like that. And then we want to hear from the people who are impacted, our fellow Marylanders, the communities, the individuals who are facing eviction, who've gone through the process, who've had frustrations or successes, whatever that might be. So for that, I think we need to do some in-person listening sessions. And I know this is a big ask for all of us. We'll try and do a hybrid format so that task force members, as we do our listening sessions, I really think of that as plenary work. It's something that we all would want to participate in as much as possible, because we all want to be able to understand this information and hear from folks. But I do know that it's going to be a very brisk calendar and we're all busy people. So I understand that you may not be able to be at every session. And unlike our meetings where we would normally do a doodle poll and try and find out, what's the common time that we can all gather, these might not work for your schedule. There we go. They may not work for your schedule, and therefore they will be recorded, and you will have an opportunity to access the information. We don't want to leave anybody behind, but we need to move forward. So as far as listening sessions, I'm proposing that we would do 4 regional sessions. One in Western Maryland, this is a broad swath, mind you. I realize it's a little bit of a blunt instrument. One on the Eastern Shore, one in the Baltimore metropolitan region, and then one in kind of the DC suburban Southern Maryland region, for lack of a better term. I welcome some thoughts about locations where we can do this. We're going to be looking at some public places where people could come and give testimony if they want to be able to, so we can hear from them. We'll certainly reach out. We're going to count on some of our advocate communities and some of our other, landlord partners who may want to show up, but we really want to hear from these communities and these individuals who are facing eviction. And I think that's critical. So that's a bit of a big ask. I myself I'm committing to go to all 4. And again, we'll try and stream or hybrid them so that you can join in if you can't be physically present. So that's the work ahead for October, and it's a huge lift, but we don't have much time. If we'd had summer study, we could have, done a longer process and done this in a more measured way that worked for schedules. But unfortunately, we don't have the benefit of that time. So we really need to kind of march forward anyway. So I'll be sending out a calendar, a schedule. We're trying to do that. I welcome your input. I don't know if you have any comments about that. I'd love to hear from you right now, a little discussion before we, why don't I finish the calendar and then we'll come back to these listening sessions, because that's I know, a challenging moment for the task force. In November, so what we will do then is we'll harvest that information. We'll take the information that we've gleaned from these listening and fact-finding sessions. And then essentially, primarily in November, I'm proposing that we break into 3 committees. It's a lot of work to do in a short period of time, and committees are a very effective way to get work done. So I'm proposing 3 committees. The first would be, and they're basically tracking our charge, if you will. So one would be on funding. Since that's a critical thing, we have to respond to what would the funding be. And Deb Seltzer of MLSC has graciously agreed to chair that committee, since they're going to need to stand up the program and it's core to their work. She'll be handling that for us, working on that issue. We'll have an implementation committee, and that will really, as it sounds, it's really focusing on what's going on, the procedures, how do we implement this Access to Counsel initiative. Stu Sims and Kelly O'Connor had said that they would be willing to co-chair that committee. So we're looking at that as a place. And then the third committee would be outreach and assessment. And that essentially, outreach, really, we have a charge to make sure that people know about Access to Counsel. How are we going to accomplish that? How are folks going to know about this access, this ability to obtain legal representation in evictions? And assessment really has to do with data. How do we measure it? Is it effective? Is it not effective? We need to understand what what's going on, whether we need to target resources, what's the impact. Rena Shaw is going to be heading that committee because the Access to Justice Commission is already working in that area, and that makes sense as well for that. So that's what we have in terms of the 3 committees. And that committee work, I expect that there may be some preliminary in October, at least an opportunity, or maybe at the end of September, to try and see. I invite each of you to consider where you fit best, where you'd like to fit best. In those, you may want, we have different areas represented. You may want to try and work with your companion to make sure that we have some balance. But the committees will also give us an opportunity to bring in some other voices, some other folks who have expertise or knowledge to share in these 3 different areas. And we'd be primarily, again, working in November for the committees to take that information and formulate recommendations. What do they see as some of the recommendations in that month of November? Because come December, we really need to have the committees bring forward some recommendations and then consider those and essentially get our approval from the group for the recommendations and draft the report. And then we would have another meeting in December to approve the report, essentially, so that we can, I would guess we need to do that somewhere by mid-December so that we have time to publish and issue the report by January 1st. It's a very, again, brisk timeline for people who have day jobs. So, but I appreciate your attention to this. It's hugely important. As we heard about, there are so many people who are really at risk of eviction in Maryland, and there's an opportunity here to be able to provide some relief. It's an interesting time. We are charged with forward-looking work. So we're looking forward to implement this access to counsel. However, the context in which we work is while the crisis is unfolding. And our friends certainly in the judiciary and throughout this call understand the impact of that crisis. So it's there's a little bit of tension there, but we have to stay focused on what our charge is, which is really to look at this, look at what our obligations are, and to make that report to the Assembly with our recommendations. So that's how I see the months ahead. And I would absolutely love to have some input from you about either, what you see, certainly about the listening sessions, and whether there are groups that I didn't name that we need to hear from. So I'm opening it up for a little discussion.
I had a question in terms of the listening sessions. I understand the idea of sort of breaking it into regions, but I'm wondering if there's data that shows like the number of evictions across the state, and maybe that could help, because we have such a limited time frame. Maybe it would make sense to almost consolidate, those listening sessions to like be most impactful. I'm not sure exactly what the data is, but I would imagine like the Baltimore and like the DC region are the bulk of evictions. But if there are different regional differences, that should also be accounted for. That's
a good point. I think there are definitely some hot spots, and we can make sure that as we do those regional areas, the Baltimore and the kind of DC focused suburbs where I think there are the highest number of evictions. However, the one thing I'd hate to miss some of the other, there are, Maryland, the Maryland judiciary works differently in different places, and the experience is different for folks on the Eastern Shore and Western Maryland. So I would feel perhaps we haven't fully accounted for some of those differences if we don't try and listen there. But I do understand, you're right, there's more impact in that and higher numbers of evictions. Any other thoughts on that point?
would also just say that some of those rural counties have high per capita evictions rather than bulk numbers. So I think we will want to look, but it may be a good idea, as Luke said, those regions are large, right? So when we're looking at locations within those regions, to maybe focus on either the bulk numbers or the per capita numbers that would be most impacted.
Thanks, Deb. Good point. Any other thoughts? And I welcome really from some of our grassroots folks who are on the ground doing this work, some ideas and suggestions as to the where and the forums that we might use, because I think that does make a difference too, as to whether people feel comfortable coming to a certain location. Some locations are more comfortable for communities than others. For example, we could use the University of Baltimore, but School of Law, I know that I'd be happy to host a forum here, but the question is it the right forum? And does that really, will people feel comfortable coming here, or is there a better location in community that suits and will bring people? Any thoughts about that from my on the ground folks?
Yeah, I think it could be helpful.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I was just going to say my only concern with that in-person listening is just, of course, the COVID protocols that would have to come into play with all of that. I think that might be a pretty massive undertaking to try to coordinate that with so little time.
Yeah.
Well, folks are coming to court. I figured they could. So, it's a thought though. You're right. We have to be careful. We certainly want to be safe. Yes, Catherine.
I was just going to echo Jason's thoughts and offer that I'm sure CASA would be willing to open any of our spaces that have room available in person, and we should definitely try to make sure we can keep everything at minimum a hybrid. And then of course, we'll certainly need translation for folks. So, when we're online, it's a bit easier and less time consuming when we can do translation at the same time.
Okay. All right. Interesting. I was just concerned about digital access for some folks. But that may be just fine. All right, Kat, thank you. Thanks for the offer. Appreciate that. Anyone else on that? How about as to who we should hear from? Because we're going to start arranging these meetings, and I want to make sure everybody has a chance to weigh in on who we should be hearing from.
Vicki, are you anticipating hearing from multiple constituencies at the same session, or hosting different sessions for tenants versus landlords versus, like would the landlord be just a virtual one, and then the listening sessions for tenants would be the or hybrid one, or that kind of thing? Or were you thinking of just the 4 sessions that every different group?
I was thinking of both,
Okay.
2 different, yeah, that the listening sessions, I'm not saying that there might be folks who would come in who represent, especially small landlords or whatever, who want to come in, or tenants or tenant advocacy groups who might want to come in during those listening sessions. In fact, I expect that would happen. If you open the door, folks can come in. And so we would want to be open about that. But I do think it's different than the legal service providers and the landlord property owners. I think we would have, and we would look to our folks on the task force to help us identify, or at least spread the word about the opportunity to speak to the task force. And those, I think, would be virtual and their own session. I'd like to kind of keep both, because I think the type of conversation we'd have about procedures and other things that we'd hear from providers and from landlords and property owners would be different than perhaps the impact of eviction and what's going on, and really understanding that from a kind of a human scale level. So that was my thinking. But I do think we probably would consolidate that and just so that just in the interest of time, those virtual sessions.
Would it be worthwhile?
Okay, Jason, and then Luke.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile to set up an email address where people could send in their written testimonies in the event that they're not able to come in person or to come virtual, so that they can still, get their stories out there.
Yeah, they can, and that's a great idea, and we have one. So the good news is we already have that. And Leah had mentioned it. It's okay, Leah, I know you're there. What's our address?
Okay.
A2C at oag.state.md.us. Not the easiest one to do, but that's what we've got. So absolutely, Jason, that's a really good idea. And I think we could encourage folks who want to be heard, but may not be able to either show up or the timing doesn't work or whatever. Luke, you had a comment as well?
Sure. I was just going to say on the housing provider side, I could certainly speak with AOBA for specifically the region around DC and the suburbs. I'm sure a lot of housing providers would be interested in sharing their perspectives and feedback. Yeah, because it's varied. The housing provider sector's segmented a good deal. So that might be an interesting way to get feedback from folks. And virtual works well for most of our teams. Great.
Yeah, and that's another reason to do virtual for the providers and the housing providers, the legal service providers and the housing providers too. Yeah, more participation, I think, for folks. Great.
Vicki, I'm connected to Renters United Maryland, which is a group of tenant advocacy groups, and I would be happy to reach out to them and see about setting or having them participate together. It's Public Justice Center, Jews for Justice. There's a lot of different tenant advocates who are involved in this coalition, and I think that would be a good place to reach out and get some on-the-ground feedback from people providing services and also who have connections to tenants who might be interested in sharing their stories.
And
great.
Vicki, this is Pam. Is the focus of the listening events going to be taking a look at some of the practical aspects? Because I think a big focus of the task force is implementation of the Access to Counsel bill. There's been a lot of work on the need, and I'm wondering, it might be helpful to hear from people about
their experience.
Well, how to get the services to them, because I think that's the primary focus, right, of the task force is how we implement the bill that was passed last year.
Yes, I think so, because when I say their experience, it's their experience getting to court. How can they do that? We want to know how that's playing out in the ground. I think with the providers too, there'll be a lot of suggestions about implementation, but I think we can learn some things. So I'm hoping there'll be an opportunity for some follow-up questions for the task force with some of the folks who are at the listening sessions. That may be something, I'm not sure whether folks will offer that, but we want to get some information from folks about how that's playing out. So is that what you were meaning, Pam?
Yeah. I mean, my sense of the bill that was passed that created the task force was that the focus is on implementing the program that was envisioned but not funded by House Bill 18.
That's right. That's why we have one committee on funding, because otherwise we're just have an exercise of, thinking about something. So, all right, yeah, absolutely. I think we need to know how this will play out from various perspectives. And as in terms of the judiciary session, Kelly and Pam will be reaching out probably to Chief Judge Morrissey to see if he can come meet with us and maybe, or whomever, or his designee, to talk to us a little bit about how that's going. We know the notice of intent was already drafted, and we need to just understand how things are happening for the court and what their view is in terms of implementation as well. So we want to hear from the various folks involved in the implementation.
This is Pam Newland. Some of the Baltimore metro area is very large, and we recognize that the tenants have some difficulty getting to places. Transportation's an issue. Timing is an issue. We know we're having some difficulty trying to schedule rent assistance appointments for them because they're now back to work. So I think timing is going to be really important as far as this is concerned. In addition, you might want to host more than one for the Baltimore metro area or some of the larger jurisdictions. And I think the biggest thing is advance notice.
Mm-hmm. I think we're losing your audio, Pam. We heard more than one, important for advance notice, and that it's hard for people to get there, especially now that folks are back to work, and it's just a harder thing. That's what we heard from Pam, but the end of your audio cut out. So that's a decision for the task force. If we want to try and extend ourselves and do a little bit more, I'm game. I just didn't want to I understand the work ahead of us and that there's a lot that we're asking of you now. So I think that's entirely possible. I'd appreciate hearing from, as I said, some of the folks who are working directly with tenants or housing providers. I imagine the tenants will have greater challenges getting to these listening sessions, of course. So we could look at doing more than one in the Baltimore. I think this is your point, Luke, is that, the impacted areas are those two metropolitan areas that are experiencing the highest numbers. So that's a possibility. I'm not sure, Stu, I don't know if you have any opinions based on, legal aid's experience, or maybe you want to consult with some of your colleagues on that about.
I will, consult and try to get whatever information you need.
Okay. Great. All right. Are there any other thoughts? Because this really is going to be our framework. So I didn't want to gloss over it or not give people a chance to talk about, what is missing or some of the challenges. Okay. All right. Well, we won't belabor. I just didn't want to cut you off. Okay. Then what I would say as sort of the next steps, we are going to have some law students who will be staffing the committees. So we have that in addition to Leah, who is, in a different category, but we'll have some committees. So at least for some of the note taking, for some of the work and the scheduling, as well as some of the spot research. Some students will be doing that. We have some other clinical law students who are researching the other jurisdictions, doing a national view of, the implementation of a right to counsel or access to counsel in other jurisdictions. So they'll be, providing some information to us as well. So we've got that going right now. So we have a little bit of help for that. And then I think the next, I understand that Ms. Rodriguez is online now, so we're going to just jump back and hear from her if we can. Señora Rodriguez, are you there?
Señora Rodríguez, ¿escucha? Señora Rodríguez, verifique si su teléfono está en silencio. I think she might be having some technical issues with her.
Oh, well, we totally feel her on that one. We understand. We've all been there.
And just so that I think she can hear. I just don't know if she can unmute, but she did say that she can hear. So that's good.
Good. I'm so glad, and we look forward to working with you, Ms. Rodriguez, and hearing from you in future meetings. Absolutely. We want to hear from you and about your experiences. So,
Vicki, this is Rena. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. It might be because I was having this issue. I was trying to talk earlier and I just unmuted on my phone the mute button. But I think because someone, maybe Leah had muted us all, you also need to take the additional step of pressing the *6. Otherwise, you won't be able to talk. That was my issue earlier, so I don't know if that may be her issue, just highlighting that. If she tried that, maybe it would work.
Thank you, Rena. Sorry about that.
Okay. Kathy, Sierra? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we are, we get all these strange announcements. Okay. Is Ms. Rodriguez able to unmute? If not, we're going to get ready to conclude the meeting. I know we're coming up at the end.
I think she dropped off, so I think we can
move forward. All right. Okay, fair enough. All right. So from here, please do feel free to reach out. You can email me and Leah. That's probably a good approach. If you have specific ideas or suggestions with regards to some of the scheduling and the sessions that we're planning for October. Also, I would really love to hear from you where you would like to fall in terms of the committee assignments, where you think you would like to participate and put your energy and efforts. And other than that, I think that's it, really. And then what I'll do is, I'd really like to hear from you. I know it's kind of brisk, but really by the end of the week, in terms of suggestions for about the listening sessions or fact finding and your committee assignments, because I need to come forward and we want to put a schedule together. I know you're all busy. I want to make sure we can get on your calendars so that you can participate as much as possible in the month ahead. So that's the goal. So if you could get that to me as soon as possible, but in definitely by the end of the week, committee assignment, any suggestions about listening sessions or fact finding, or Pam, if you have a more specific way of framing some of those listening sessions that you'd like to suggest, I'd welcome that, absolutely. So is there anything else that we want to cover today? Any other comments from the group? Okay, I think we have done the deed. Thank you so much. We'll be spending some time together over the next few months. It was a pleasure to get to know you a little bit. And please feel free to reach out if you have any suggestions or concerns. We welcome hearing from you. Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vicki, very much.